Hello YouTube. Decided to go ahead and make a vlog of my beekeeping journey or potential beekeeping journey this year. I was interested in bees about 10 years ago. I had a neighbor that was getting into it and never really left my mind to want bees at one point in my life, and I felt last year was a good place to begin because one of my brothers bought a house from an elderly gentleman who had 3 deep bodies, about 3 shallows, bottom board, and a top cover. And when he originally told me that he had the hive, he's like, "Hey, I have a hive out here. You should come pick it up. Do you want it?" So I was like, "Well, sure." At the time, I was thinking that it was actually a colony that was established, but when I got there, this was actually just all disassembled, and there was actually hardly any comb inside of it. Later on, my brother told me that the elderly man failed a couple times in building or keeping colonies because he was neighboring a golf course, and he believed that the pesticides that they used out there kept eliminating his colony, which I would believe because they were hardly ever established. Which the biggest frame of comb is actually this older one here, and that's this one here in the middle, and it's barely drawn out. It's not to the edge or anything. They did some work to it, but this is, out of the 50 frames that I pulled out, this is the only one that had comb. So who knows what exactly happened. Maybe he wasn't that. It's kind of seemed kind of soon for them to pull out of this hive or pass away with barely drawing a comb out. But this year is my last year's swarm trap design. I didn't know anything about bee space, well, as far as volume goes, what is desirable. So I made I had to build 9 of these, so I was kind of short on time, and I went ahead and kept the full 1x12 size for volume, and I was thinking that if I was successful, then I was going to go ahead and transfer the frames over to one of the empty bodies and go ahead and cut these down on a table saw. With 9 hives, I was hoping to be like four of them be successful, 4 or 5, and I would have been able to have enough for my first year by having this body and the full setup. And then any colony that I caught after that would have been kept inside these, trimmed down to be the actual correct size that a deep body needs to be. And then I was going to double stack the bodies to create a hive to last my first year. But last year I was not successful in catching these. Part of the reasons from local beekeepers was that being fairly successful in catching swarms, they actually didn't do too great themselves, and they kind of blamed it on a harsh winter, which is a little bit discouraging because this year seems to be a little bit harsher than last year. But I do have 14 new swarm traps that I've assembled this year, and I'll get into talking about those whenever I get to setting them up. But just a little bit more about this was not being successful with this, maybe due to volume, maybe due to brand new wood smell. I built these a month before swarm season, and the way my intention was, like I said earlier, was to move these frames over. That way the swarm that would enter in here, which I actually have on this gate here, this bee gate is one of the designs that I had, was with the lid and this hanging on a tree, with this being exposed. I was going to come in and close up the swarm inside in the evening, and then transfer it home and do the transfer, well, the way I was just going to do it. But like I said, that didn't quite work. Could have been new wood smell. I was using lemongrass oil this year. One of my tactics is to go ahead and try Swarm Commander this year. So I went ahead and bought a bottle. I might need to, with the amount of swarm traps that I've built, or I might do 50-50, where I'll use this and what I believe to be the best spots, and lemongrass oil in others just to see what is, just kind of do a little bit of test, a little trial error. Last year I also didn't have any honeycomb. Besides that one frame I pulled out of here, I didn't have any honeycomb to help aid in catching swarms and adding some sort of different attractant other than the oil. And this year, a buddy of mine had an open hive inside underneath his deck, and he actually wanted it gone. Last year he said he had bees in it. This is before I even went to go see it. He said that he has bees, he wants them removed, and I thought that maybe that would be the way I'd get my bees last year. But the bees from the year previous, he was thinking that they migrated, and he's like, the bees are gone now. When they come back, I want you to take the hive. But I know that the bees were probably dying off every year being an open hive, and the next year's swarm, the nearby swarm would come and take over it again. But anyway, he wanted it gone this spring, this winter, so I went over there and grabbed it, and I actually filled up this whole bucket with honeycomb. None of it was that dark color that I was desiring. It's all pretty light, like this one here. And something else about this honeycomb that's kind of odd is the depth of these. I know for sure that these were honeybees, but it's just kind of odd that this is finished at about 3/8 to a half an inch, and this right here is a good 1.5 to 2 inches in some areas. And the whole, all the honeycombs seem to be that way. There is some good ones, like this one here. Oops, like this one here. But anyway, going back to what I was doing here was I cut the honeycomb, and I took a hot fillet knife against a torch. I heated it up, and I was able to cut a nice straight strip on these honeycombs, because these honeycombs were the size of like a baseball, or sorry, not baseball, basketball. So I cut it into straight edges, and the way I have these frames here, these deep frames, last year I was going to go foundationless, and I was just going to use a wax strip, starter strip. And I cut the piece of honeycomb that I was able to get, that I sized up. I cut out my strip accordingly to fit it inside, and I actually laid it down on a table like this. And I took a torch, and I went ahead and heated the wax up in that area to melt it and make a puddle. And I took this wax with that straight edge, and while hot, I went ahead and pressed it into the wax, and that's how I was able to get these frames set up. So hopefully these inside my swarm traps this year is going to work. I was able to get about 20 to 30 of these frames. Not all of them are the same, but each one of these has honeycomb. So I was going to put one of these frames along with 4 empty frames inside of this swarm trap. This shallow one, I drilled a hole here on the center mark, and I used a wire, and I went ahead and made a hook, and that's how I was able to get this swarm trap. I followed somebody else's example. You'd be able to find his video on YouTube. I'm not sure what I can and cannot say on these videos. I don't want to recommend other channels for the most part, just out of copyright. Like I said, I'm not sure. This is going to be my first video. I'll just kind of wait for people to comment and ask questions, and I'll go ahead and answer them. This is a starter video. It's kind of a mess, but I figured I'd better start somewhere, just to explain myself. These swarm traps here, I don't know what I mentioned. I already forgot what I mentioned 10 minutes ago, but what I was able to do was find these online. Once I saw this on YouTube, I found these online for $4 a piece per bucket. And with a bulk of 28, I was able to get it for $1.50. And so what I did was I put the frame with honeycomb on the inside along with a hook, the 4 holes on the bottom with expanding foam, 3 holes on top, 1 here, and so when it hangs, which would be like this, the hole would be on the bottom, and hopefully along with Swarm Commander and the frame of honeycomb, it'd be able to draw something in. I also used this weatherproofing, water-based deck sealer. I kind of did a little bit late. I should have waited, but I jumped the gun. I was too excited. I should have not assembled anything and sprayed them down and then assembled them. But I went ahead and did the foam, and I went ahead and assembled it and didn't really consider waterproofing it until I did a little test and I got it wet because I was curious. And I kind of started getting gooey feeling. So I'm hoping with this weatherproofing that these will last at least this swarm season. But for $1.50, you really can't beat that. This whole thing, I mean, with the free frame and a little bit of work, this whole setup for me was $5, along with 14 other traps with a total of, with 9 in this style and 14 in this style. I think I might at least hopefully get one swarm. I really hope one swarm, because I have more videos coming up where I'm going to build 10 more of these bodies, which is a lot, but I'm expecting at least 10 of these be successful, at least half of them. Out of 25, I would hope that one, at least 10. I hope at least one, just one would be worth it to me, just for the experience. But another thing that I plan on doing early spring is I stumbled upon the bee lining way of catching bees, where you catch a bee inside here. You catch a bee, you close it, you lift up this gate, and it'll fly towards the light, which is this plexiglass. And then you go ahead and close this back up, and all the bees will be stored in here, and you catch them like 10 or so, and then you put a sugar water on the inside, close it, lift up the gate, allow the bees to find the sugar water, open it, they'll be drinking it, hopefully, flying off and coming back, and you kind of mark the direction and the time that it takes for them to come and go, and you'll be able to find them. And I know that I do have somewhere next to me a local colony. One, I see bees. Two, growing up here at this house, we've personally actually seen about 3 swarms just in my neighbor, like right next door neighbor property. So I'm thinking that they're really close by. I'm hoping that this will allow me to find them, and hopefully with 25 swarm traps, I'll be able to catch something. If you have any questions, or maybe I missed something, this is pretty unorganized. Like I said, this is last minute. Maybe my next video will be a lot more with like a direction as far as I'm going, more explaining more in depth how I built that, and I will do that whenever I set these up. I'll go ahead and make videos, but maybe this will become a series, and I hope it does. As long as I have people watching, I'll keep making videos. So thanks for watching. Let's see what happens next.